We'll get started in 1 more minute. Sorry, don't have any hold music. So good afternoon, everyone, or for some people, good morning. Welcome to our third NIFS Next Gen webinar. To those who are on the webinar now, or to those who are going to be listening to us afterwards, welcome. My name is Bill Padness. I am the Director of Workforce Development for the Non-Ferrous Founder Society, and I also serve as a staff liaison for the Next Gen Committee. For this webinar, you are all unmuted. Um, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it into the Q&A or in the chat box. We will stop when there is something needed, and then afterwards we'll be happy to unmute you if you want to ask your question live, or when Sue prompts for that to happen, we'll be happy to do so. Again, today's session is going to be speaking up when you rather stay silent, overcoming communication resistance in challenging moments. And our speaker today is Sue Tinnish, a leadership coach and organizational change expert based out of the Chicago area. Now, Sue brings a rare combination of strategic insight, knowledge, and real-world experience to every stage and setting. I know this personally as knowing Sue for almost probably over 20 years, um, where when I was just a staff member at the Meeting Professionals International Chicago chapter, and Sue was the chair of the educational committee, we worked a lot on this. So, which is one of the reasons why I wanted her to be talking, because I know how much she helps organizations and the people within them, because navigating those complex challenges with clarity and confidence. I knew that from personal experience. Sue has worked directly with operational teams and executive leaders to develop stronger communication cultures, improve team dynamics, and elevate emerging talent, which is one of the main reasons why we have her speaking with the next gen. She is a sought-after speaker and facilitator. I'm really glad we were able to schedule this because of her passion about equipping people at all levels with the tools to speak up, collaborate effectively, and lead with intentionality. Now, she holds a Ph.D. in organizational development and serves as the Vista Chair, guiding business owners and CEOs through a combination of coaching and peer learning. Her approach resonates especially well with technical and operation mind professionals, which is part of the reason why we have her speaking with us here at NIFS, because she understands combining the practical frameworks with human-centered insight. She is particularly excited to work with us and honoring your roles in shaping the future of metal casting and your organizations. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Sue Tinnish.
What a nice introduction. Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Bill. I'm really happy to be here and excited to see the opportunity that you all have as this next generation leaders. And what I really hope to accomplish today is to make sure that you walk away with a really strong understanding of how important you are. You're a linchpin in terms of helping culture, quality, and safety in your organizations. And at the same time, acknowledging that because you are younger leaders, that it can be really challenging. And by acknowledging those barriers, really thinking about what kind of tools and ideas and tips can I share with you today so that you really leave this webinar more equipped to, to think, how can I speak up, especially in those difficult situations? So if there's anything else you want to make sure that we cover, just put it in the chat and I'll work hard to make sure that we get to everything. So the first thing I'd be interested in hearing from you by putting in the chat is, why do you stay silent? What holds you back from speaking up? Just take a quick second to put something in the chat and Bill can monitor that can see what are some of the common issues that really hold us back. What's coming in, Bill?
Nothing right at this moment, but that could be part of what's holding you speaking up back. But I think a lot of times, to me, when we say is why we stay silent, especially talking leadership, is one not wanting to. Actually, it's saying that chat is disabled. So we'll
Oh,
have to, so maybe try in the Q&A to put something in, but I apologize. I'm trying to figure out why the chat would be disconnect. So I will check on that. But Sue, let's talk a little bit, I think, about not wanting to offend anybody. Or is it my place to say something?
absolutely. And especially when we're talking about communicating upward, it can be challenging because these people have more powerful positions than we do. And w- when generation leaders certainly have good experience, but they may feel that their position in the organization doesn't really allow them to speak up, especially again, communicating to higher ups. But there are certainly common reasons. So, fear of being wrong or overstepping, obviously not wanting to challenge or create any conflict. And you may even think that in your space that, oh, really, should I be speaking up? Is it my place to do that? Or you may work in an organization that's a little more traditional, and the ethos there is simply do your job and stay quiet. Those are very common reasons. And sometimes people are individually, you might be a people pleaser and like you just, that's related to conflict. There could be lots of reasons why we don't speak up. And especially in your world, there's a lot of industry challenges I think that you have. You're working in a production environment. It's probably noisy, it's earplugs are necessary, and it may not seem in a production environment that it's really the right time to bring something up. It's just not the right time for soft conversations. Hopefully that's resonating with some of you. But I think it's important to take and have a mind shift, sh change, shift the way you start to think about it. Because you do have a voice in the organization and you need to use it. This is one way to begin to demonstrate that you are really a leader. When you show that you have an opinion, that you care about the organization, that you've employed analytical skills, critical thinking, those are important ways to sort of step up and show what you can do for an organization. But more and more, what we see in organizations, even in very traditional industries, is that your role is really not just to produce, it really is to observe, improve, and demonstrate that you can lead. And those are skills. And with practice, you can improve those skills. You can gain some more confidence about speaking up, and you can get more skilled at the kinds of words and language that you might want to use that allow you to speak up authoritatively, but still respectfully. And really, ultimately, if your organization, whether family run business, no matter its size, especially in the world we live in today, if your organization is going to thrive and survive into the future, innovation, continuous improvement is really important. And the reality is, our leaders tend to live a little bit more in bubbles, right? Nobody likes to tell somebody more senior than you, oh, something's not working perfectly. And so the truth tends to get spun. And leaders live in this bubble and they don't necessarily really hear everything that's going on. And yet, the reality is people at closer to the production, people in lower levels of the organization tend to really understand where this innovation can occur, where there can be some improvement in a process, in a document, wherever. And so it's incumbent upon you as the next generation of leaders is to offer that insight, to give that input so that the organization will thrive and survive. And in some worlds, I think maybe in your family situation or even in the culture of your organization, it's perceived that speaking up is being disrespectful. But I would challenge you to recast that and think about speaking up as really owning your own perspective. And importantly, showing that you care enough about the company to contribute. And ultimately, your contributions can lead to helping the organization, whether it's in terms of safety or cost. And those things are important. So I hope you just take a moment to say, yeah, speaking up is the right thing to do in my organization. And now I promised you at the outset that I'd give you a chance to think about tools for speaking up. And so I'm going to give you 6 different tools that I think will enable you to think about how you can take a specific challenge or a problem or something that you see in your organization and have the courage, the language, and the skill to speak up. So the first tool I want to talk about is just really naming the impact. And what this tool enables you to do, or engaging with this kind of framework, is it helps shift the focus from just your personal opinion to being focused on the broader impact, either on yourself, on the team, the safety, the outcome, and in fact, the entire company. And when we start to name the impact, it really lowers the defensiveness by not pointing fingers. Accountability is not about blaming and shaming, but it's really about learning. And if we can see the impact on the organization, then people are more likely to think, yes, this is an area that we need to focus on changing the organization. And really, ultimately, what you're aiming for is that there are shared goals in your organization. I mean, who in your organization isn't focused on quality, isn't focused on efficiency, isn't focused on safety? Everybody is, and everybody should be. So I'd just like to, I understand the chat's now working. So what might you be able to say in this circumstance when you wanted to name the impact? If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. See what kind of language, what words you might use. And while people are adding something to the chat or the Q&A, I will mention that Bill has nicely offered to share a document with you that I'll put together that will codify and just document and summarize all these tips and some of the language that we use. So how might you name that impact? Anything coming in, Bill?
Not at this second, but I do know that, and I want to make sure that Chris mentioned from the previous part is when you talked about it was being part of in a group or in a comfortable situation. So, I know that was from the previous conversation, but I wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Sure, very important. Thanks, Chris, for that contribution. So just some thoughts. You can say in this kind of situation when you want to name the impact, I want to bring this up because if we don't catch this now, or if I don't share this with you now, it could affect, and then name the impact, whether it's a customer, safety, timeline. So here you're really showing not that you're, again, trying to point fingers or, be like Mr. or Ms. Know-it-all, but rather I care about the organization and here's the impact that it could have on the organization. So that's one tool. Name the impact. Hopefully that resonates. Tool number two, the I notice, kind of wondering about this. So this is an approach and some language that you can use to be very non-threatening. It reduces the emotional reaction that someone might have to the kinds of words that you might use. So I wonder, I notice. And let me share with you some language that you might be able to use. Hey, I've noticed X happening, or I wonder if we've ever thought about why, or even just asking, can I ask a quick question? When you say, can I ask a quick question? And someone says, yes, think about what it does to that interaction. You already have permission to dive into the conversation. Can I ask a quick question? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Well, I've noticed something happening on the floor and I wonder what you thought about it, or has the organization ever addressed this? When you do that, you have the opportunity again, permission to speak, and then an opportunity to be honest and helpful. My third tool is really asking about feedback. And here again, this is an opportunity to signal and show that you have respect for both the chain of command, the organization, and senior people. And it really is aims to just create that space where you can offer input without putting somebody on the defensive. And this technique will work really well if you work in a more hierarchical organization where there is a strong chain of command and it's perceived as more of a top-down culture. And I suspect some of you do have that kind of cultural environment. So what kind of language can you use in this situation? Hi, so good to see you. Are you looking for any feedback on how to fill in the blank? Do you mind if I offer a thought about something I just observed on the floor today? See how that kind of language lowers the sensitivity and increases your chance of being listened to. And I might add that, some of these tools you can combine. The fourth tool that I wanted to talk about is really speaking to the future. And so what you want to do is position your input as being constructive, not really critical. You want to focus on what's next, not necessarily what went wrong. And again, it's always about improvement and not blame. And it might encourage some openness from your colleagues, people on your team, or supervisors. So, some language you might use to avoid this in the next batch. Could we try this? Going forward, maybe we could build a double check into our process, our system, our flow. How might that work? Tool number 5, the 5-second rule. Have you ever used this when something falls on the floor? Oh, 2-second rule. I can still eat it, even though it fell. So really, in keeping with concepts of security and safety, you might have this uh, mantra in your culture. If you see something, say something. So this 5-second rule just says when something happens in the moment, this is your chance to offer some feedback because you might lose your courage. You might be concerned about what to say and how to say it. And sometimes you just need to have a little courage and speak up at the moment. So don't necessarily overthink things before speaking up. My sixth idea is just to think about leading with relationship, not necessarily with rebellion. And I know many of you work in family-run businesses or founder-led businesses. And again, this is a chance for you to show that you care about the long-term sustainability of the organization, and that you care about the values that are important to the organization. So when you think about this too, you can also think like, what are the strategic elements? Well, what are the strategies that our organization is following? What are the values that are important in our organization? And by tying your comments back to, I know that we're really focused on X. I know that one of our values is Y. When you do that, again, you're framing your input as being really constructive and not necessarily confrontational. So how might you say this? I'm bringing this up because I really care about both our business and our family. I feel like this is really important to our future. And so I wanted to speak up. As a family member, I wanted to continue to invest in our progress. So I'm speaking up. Now, I'd like to also, with that, give you some other tips, some additional ideas for ways that you can have these conversations. And one tip is to really offer the context and then offer the content. The content is your suggestion. It's the thing that you feel is really important. So the idea here is to set the stage, give the context, and then deliver the content. So what kind of language might you use to employ this idea? I'm really committed to this company. I want to see our company be really successful. I really see that I'm going to have a long career here. And here is another, I think, great sentence stem to offer up, especially if you think someone's going to react a little more emotional and maybe not necessarily with the kind of reaction you want. Just help set the stage for them. You know, Bill, I know this might be really difficult for you to hear. And my ask is just simply that you just give me a chance to get this all out before you actually react. By sharing with people this context, they start to see your positive intentions before you start delivering the bad news, the things that you see that needs to be improved. And I know that in traditional organizations like foundries, there's probably a mindset around if it isn't fixed, why do we need to break it? It's been working fine for 30 years. I don't see why you need to bring this up. But when you set the stage, then it lowers people's potential defensiveness and allows you to get out your suggestion. So in all of these tips, just think about offering that context before you deliver the content, the things that you're going to suggest. You can even say, I know we've probably looked at this before. However, the world has changed. So just again, soften the blow, as it were. I'd also say you need to think carefully about your timing. So, when is it the right time to bring something up? When people's hair is on fire and there's a major crisis, maybe it's not time to put in place the 5-second rule. Maybe it's much better to think about when is the right time to do that. So, hey, I know we just went through a major problem, and I'd really like to get your input on something. Could we find 20 minutes to talk about this tomorrow? And if people aren't receptive, then I think you can just ask the right question. Okay, I understand. Now's not the right time to talk about it. When might be a time where we could revisit this issue? When might be a time where you'd be open to talking about this? I think the secret in having these conversations is always to be ready to ask questions so that you are able to position yourself and talk a little bit more specific to somebody's potential objections. And it's always important to use curiosity, not criticism. When people think you're going to criticize a process, an organizational structure, a document, a roadmap, an approach that they use, then of course they're going to be a little defensive. You're picking, as it were, picking on them and their idea. But when you approach it from a point of curiosity, I'm just wondering. I'm really curious. Then people are less likely to react so defensively and emotionally. So clearly, rather than saying, this isn't working, I've been thinking about how we handle X. What do you think about trying this new approach? What would happen if we experimented? This might not be the final answer, but it could get us closer to achieving our quality standards. It could get us closer to higher customer satisfaction scores. Another tip is just to really, you've heard the expression, there's an elephant in the room, that big thing that's just sitting there and nobody wants to talk about, no one wants to really acknowledge. You can name the elephant, but do it gently. So you can talk about difficulties that the organizations has had around experimentation or innovation or trying new things. You can also acknowledge not only maybe something that's occurred within your organization, but also a challenge or that you have even bringing this up yourself. So it might be a more internal tension or fear. So, you know what? I know this could be really tricky to discuss, but I have a lot of faith in you. I've seen how good you are as a manager. I've seen how good you are on the production floor. I've seen how skilled you are at something related to your business. And so, therefore, I think you're the right person to come to. And I'm really kind of nervous to mention this. I've only been in the organization for 3 months, 3 years. But I really want us to be successful. And so I'm screwing up my nerve. I'm getting the courage to talk about it, even though I know it may be difficult to hear. And when you name that elephant, it again lowers the defensiveness. So much of speaking up, I think, comes from when we think about it, not necessarily logic and analysis. You know what you need to say. The problem is in your gut. It's the fear, it's the emotional issue. And so, all of what I'm talking about is really trying to allow you to think about how you can make people react in a non-defensive way. I'm sure you've heard, our brains are wired for survival. And so all of this time that we've been evolving as humans, we still have a basic part of our brain that says when we're attacked, we're going to either fight, we're going to freeze, or we're going to flee. So the idea here is to change that reaction in that primitive part of our brain to not responding emotionally, but responding a little more rationally. So, again, this tip, naming the elephant, you see why I bring it up. It's about getting people not to react emotionally, but rather to get them to be in a spot where they're going to respond. We want you to stay solution focused. This is not about personal judgments. It's not about calling a single person out. It's not about historical issues. Again, it's here's an idea I have. Here's a solution that I'd like to discuss within the organization that I think will help us be more efficient, be more productive, reduce problems on the floor, make our customers happy. And not to sound like a broken record, but again, the more you can tie your conversation into things that are important to your foundry, important to your organization, the more successful you're going to be. I know one of our values is being really customer centric. And I noticed this happening, and I think I have an idea. I think I have a way that we might be able to make our customers happier. Are you interested in hearing my solution? Are you a good person for me to chat with about my solution? When you ask, again, when you ask for that permission and you tie it to the organizational goals, you're going to be much more successful. So, here's another sentence stem. Here's some language you might be able to use. Here's something I think that could help our team be more productive. Lay it out. What's your take? Even before you offer it. I have an idea that could help us be more productive. I have a solution. But I know that you, with all of your experience, or the team might be able to make this solution even better. That input from a variety of people will make the idea even stronger. So I'd like to put it out there. What's your take? How can we make it better? So I'm really interested to hear some of the challenges that you might have had in your roles, and we can role play them out. And you can use me as an expert to help us think through how might a challenge that you've encountered, how might we use some of these tips and frameworks and tools to respond? Or maybe I'll come up with a whole new idea. Who knows? So let's take a minute and see if you could add to the chat something that you feel has been particularly challenging in your career.
I know you don't have to use names or anything. I know sometimes it could be in, so we understand that component because, you know, it's all part of speaking up. But definitely, if this, you have the opportunity, please do so. We can also unmute you as well. So if you have something, you know, let us know.
Put me on the spot. Let's see if I can deliver some good language and some ideas for you. Let's brainstorm together.
Well, here, so I'm not getting something. So, Sue, I will actually throw something to you.
Okay.
And I am someone who's completely new to the foundry industry. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to let Tina, she just got a raised hand. So I am going to do that. So you are unmuted.
Tina, thanks for being so courageous.
You, you're unmuted, so you can talk. Do you have the access? You are on unmute. Oh, now you're back to mute.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yes.
And
Good. There's actually a group of us here in the conference room, so I'm going to let Jared, one of our engineers who wants to share some information.
Yeah, I guess a good place to start would be how do you deliver like the news that there'll be like continual delays in trying to get material to run a project or something, and how do you sort of convey that and lessen the blow? Say if it's already been like a project that's been going on for some time now, and
okay.
yeah.
So good question. How do you lessen the blow? How do you deliver bad news? And so, of course, many times I think part of the concern is that, first of all, as a messenger, you're going to be the one who's shot. Don't shoot the messenger like that. And that people are going to react very emotionally instead of being solution focused. So I think the first thing to think about is that really leaders don't necessarily like people that walk into their office or start a conversation, and the expression that I like to use is have a monkey on your back. You walk in to a conversation, I got a problem, aka the monkey on my back. And my goal in this conversation is to give the monkey to you. In other words, I don't really want to be part of the solution. I'm just looking to unload my problem. So if you take a philosophical approach of thinking, I don't necessarily want to dump this problem on somebody else, but I want to be part of the solution, I think that's really important because, as I said at the outset, people do not want to have you just dump and run your problems on them, even if you're in the direct line of chain of command and it's really ultimately their problem. So have that philosophy. So I think you have to choose your time correctly. And Jared, I'm not sure if you have regular stand-up meetings or one-on-one meetings with this person, but think about the timing of this. And then I think you can literally be very honest. There's a situation that I think that you need to be aware of. And you can, depending on the person, I mean, you know the person better than I do, but you can even say it's not great news. Here is the situation. Here are, just lay out the facts. And again, don't blame, um, and don't be emotional. Be factual in terms of listing the facts. And then I would say, potentially, here are the things that we've tried to do to make sure that we're not running late, that we're delivering on time, and none of those have worked, or they've worked partially. So kind of explain the facts, explain what actions you've taken and what impact they've had. We still need to make some additional improvement. We still have delays in the process. We still have whatever. And either here's the things that I'm suggesting, here's the things that the team has come up with, or you can even say, based upon everything that we've done, we're kind of at a loss on how to solve this problem. Therefore, I think that it might be useful for us to do whatever, to do one, two, or three. And I'm coming to you for some feedback, for some advice, for approval, whatever it is within your organization. So you're presenting the situation factually. You're discussing what you've done so far and what impact it's had. And then you're offering some suggestions. And then you're asking for, I guess, permission to move forward. What are those next steps? And it could be, I'm going to make the decision. You're going to make the decision. We're going to get a group of people together to make the decision, whatever's appropriate in that situation. But importantly, you're presenting the person with some options and you're demonstrating that you've attempted to have good control of the situation, that you've analyzed the situation, and that you're not coming to this person and ready to dump the problem on them. So, Jared, does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Good. What do you have to add? What do you think could make it even better? I mean, this is you're living this world. So what do you think could you add to my suggestions for the benefit of everybody that's listening?
Primarily just getting all your ducks in a row beforehand and making sure you have all the available information that is applicable. So you
Yeah,
can kind of lay things out immediately and not have to, oh, we'll get back to you on that.
right. I think that's a really good point to have all the facts and to make sure that you are presenting them so that it's not that you're not say, oh, I don't really know. And you can't possibly walk into a situation and be necessarily have every single answer for a question somebody might ask you. So, that's a fair question. Thanks for asking that question. I feel like I've learned something by that question, and I don't have the answer today, but I think I can have the answer in 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks,
Mhm.
whatever. So yeah, that's great, Jared. Thanks for adding that.
Of course.
We got two things that came through the chat. Um, and it's kind of like both is saying I don't have a problem at this second, but one of them came in is, for being in HR, but still having a background in operations, that sometimes in terms of using the current their role to bring up the opportunity to say, here are some ideas, starting a conversation to focus on how it affects the workforce. So it's kind of like, even though you're not directly necessarily in operations, but kind of using your position to be able to ask those questions or say those difficult things, because I see that can affect someone's job.
Ooh, great question. So it's really talking about a situation where it's kind of not exactly your business, but it does affect it could affect the larger or business, the larger organization. So how might you approach this? So I think one perspective is to say, you know, Bill, you might recall that even though I'm in HR now, that I have had X number of years of experience doing what in the foundry world. And that really has helped me shape the way I see things. And sometimes, Bill, has it ever happened to you that when you see something from a different perspective, that you step away from a situation, that you see it differently? Does that ever happen to you, Bill? Bill's going to probably say yes. Say yes, Bill.
Say
And
yeah,
then,
yes.
so you kind of like set the stage here, right? I don't mean to make communication sound so manipulative, but by asking questions, you can get somebody to be more in your camp before you even go there. So, so Bill said, yeah, I know that there's situations when I've had different perspective or distance from a situation that I see something that everyone can't see. Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah. And so I just wanted to share, and I'm sharing this really set the context. Bill, I'm not sharing this with you to suggest that you or your team aren't just really doing a great job. I'm not suggesting it to cast any blame. I don't do that. I'm not doing that. But I know in our organization, one of our values is continuous improvement. And so while you might sort of think like, what a Sue now, she's in HR and she's been off the floor for 2 years. I just like to share something with you. Would that be okay, Bill? Bill's going to say yes. And then you can say, and so, hey, this is what I recently observed. And, I have a lot of trust in you, Bill, that you can take this information and use it appropriately within your team to help make improvements here or there. And honestly, Bill, too, one of the skills I've really developed as an HR person is helping people through the change management process. And I know it's not easy to get people to change. And so if you even want some help with your team, I'd be happy to facilitate a conversation. You can lead with the idea, and I mean, you're the expert now, but I can help you facilitate some change management with your team to help you address this problem that I saw and make the improvements, all in the spirit of making our organization better, because continuous improvement is one of our values. It also strikes me as the question might have been, also focused on like how HR can play a role in an organization. I'm not sure if that was inherent in the question at all, but really, in my role as an HR person, Bill, I know how important it is to have the right people in the right seats. And recently I saw something that I thought you, as a production manager, as a production supervisor, would really want to know about. Bill, are you interested in hearing what I have to say? Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the space and the time to tell you. So here's what I saw. And in my experience as being an HR person, it seemed to me, and I'm not on the floor, but my perspective, my distance, my experience in HR might allow you to see something a little differently. And so my perspective is that this is a training problem, this is a communication problem, this is they don't have the right job aids. This is a bad equipment problem. This is a this kind of problem. And again, my goal in HR is to help our company make the best of all the talents and skills that people have. And so I'm happy to help you in any way that I can to really enable you to fully leverage the talent that you have on your team.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have another in the chat. It's kind of, I'm going to split it up in a two-part component.
Okay.
Um, so I think in terms of the first part, it's something we actually had during our conversation yesterday a little bit. Um, that when you're working in a family business, the hesitancy sometimes to stand to say and speak up because how do you separate the conversation that you're having with um, your supervisor, your boss, who happens to be either a parent or a older relative, you know, how do you, that of making sure that you speak up, that it stays on the professional side, it doesn't go into the personal component.
Yes, dynamics in family businesses are so challenging, right? And this one is can be challenging in so many ways. You could either be dealing with somebody that's older than you could be dealing with a peer, or you could even be dealing with somebody that's younger than you. But I think that the tip that I shared about sharing context before you share the content is probably really important. And so, Dad, Mr. Padnos, Uncle Bill, I have a lot of respect for you, and I've been so, I've been so happy to be part of the organization and to be really designated as a next generation leader and to want to continue to grow in the organization and carry forward the legacy, Uncle Bill, that you have started. It's really, impressive. So a little schmoozing. And, I really do respect the experience and the wisdom that you have and what you've been able to do. And I hope, Uncle Bill, that you also respect me, not just as your nephew, but really as a person who has done A, B, and C within the organization. And I don't want our family relationship to cloud this conversation. And I think that might be difficult. I really think it might be challenging. But I'd like you to look at me just like you might look at Sam, who's not a family member, who's well respected in the organization. And I know that we're really interested as an organization in growing our revenue, at increasing our profit margin, at reducing our OSHA incidences. And so I think if I were in your place, Uncle Bill, I'd want to hear this. And so I'd like to share something with you. And here's what it is. So I think in the conversation, I think you want to establish your own authority, whatever authority you have, whatever confidence the family has in you in what you're doing in the organization, set that as the content, part of excuse me, set that as part of the context. I think you also want to point to things that you've done successfully. And then you want to ask whoever it is, that family member, to shift and say, just as you might look at a non-family member, I really want to enter that conversation this way. This doesn't affect the fact that I'm still going to babysit for you, or, you're going to babysit for me while my wife and I get away, whatever. Remind people that you have a professional relationship and this conversation is professionally based. And set that as the entire context. Again, potentially ask, depending on the relationship, ask for permission, tie it to the strategy of the organization and what's important to Uncle Bill. And maybe it's not necessarily so important to the organization, but what does Uncle Bill really care about? And if what you have to discuss is important to him, then use that as a bridge into your conversation. I hope that helps.
I know, I mean, I was thinking about a family business that I was a part of and watching the dynamics between the daughter, the daughter, the owner and his wife and how things were a little bit and how they talk to each other and stuff.
Mm.
Um, Now, the second part of the question, you kind of answered a little bit of that when you're answering the question about HR, which is this is not necessarily in my job description of what I see, but I need to, but I think I should say something. I'm, hesitant to say something because it's not part of my job description, but I see it and I think it's important to say something, especially if you're a next gen leader, because it could affect the company that you might be in charge of soon.
Yeah. Well, I think the person who asked the question has all the ingredients to have the conversation. And that is, as a 2G, second generation, third generation person in this business, I've sat around the dinner table with you all and I've seen how you have the holistic perspective on the company and that you see how all the pieces fit together. And that has really benefited me in terms of my education about this business. I couldn't have ever gotten that by going to college or never. And so it's so great. It's so great to have that ability. And so, given that ability, I really wanted to share something that I saw that is not in my job description, but I see, not even but's a weak word. I want to share something that I saw in my job description and really will impact the future of the company, affects our values, affects our safety record, affects our efficiency, affects our margin, affects, again, what is important to the person. And so therefore, given that, I really felt like it was really important to share it with you, and then share it.
It was interesting you just mentioned about the word but, and that's one thing I was probably going to ask about because when you talk about giving context before giving the content, it almost is setting up a but statement. So how do you make it not feel like, I really enjoy, what you're doing. I respect you and everything, but I completely disagree 100% with what you're doing right now. So how do you set up the context without making it seem like it's a but?
Well, first of all, I have to be aware of it, and I think you need to use the word and. And is the better word, the better bridge word to get to the conversation. Because typically what but does is it negates everything that has been said. Oh, Sue, you were a great presenter today, but your content was off. But you had a typo on your slides, but this, I mean, it just takes away from the compliment or where you're starting from. So, but is a negating word. And it's very easy to substitute the word and. Sue, that was a great presentation. And did you ever consider that by doing X, that it might be improved? That you could be a stronger presenter if you did this. So I don't think it's that tricky. It's tricky to get the word but out of our mind and out of our vocabulary. And it's just very easy most of the time just to suggest the word and. Now, however, is another like negating word. So watch for those negating words that lessen your language. Language is important. Another word that I think is interesting and you want to avoid is the word just, even as a next gen leader. I know I've only just been here for a year. I've just been here for 20 years. Don't say just because that diminishes your authority.
So no, but just
No buts, no just.
that does. Now it's interesting. My computer is off on time, but I'm looking at the time. It's at 12:55. I don't see any other questions or things in the chat. So Sue, if you want to just do a wrap up and then I can do the wrap up as well.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for your input, putting me a little bit in the hot seat, and hopefully I gave you some language, words, stems, ideas that will allow you to have more effective conversations.
And Sue, thank you so much on behalf of the Next Gen Committee. I know you got this wrap up right there, so I apologize if I just jumped right on it. But thank you very much. And we are, definitely this is why we want to do these Next Gen webinar series, and this is the perfect example for that. So I'll let you do this little wrap up, and then I will announce the next one.
Well, again, I just want to remind you that this is your chance. This is your chance to step up by speaking up and really demonstrate that you are the leader, that you have potential that can be developed and that can be very useful to the organization. So whether it's protecting legacy, it's making improvements in the organization, I would encourage you to practice in front of the mirror. There's nothing wrong with scripting out the potential conversation just so that you can get it to roll off your tongue smoothly. And honestly, practice makes perfect. And so every conversation's not going to go exactly the way you want it to, but by keeping these tools, these frameworks top of mind, you'll be able to frame the conversation so that it's much more likely to be successful. And you're going to be a stronger, better leader, next gen leader, a better, stronger future gen leader, and the organization's going to be better off. So thank you for your attention. Thanks for your input. And it's been a delight to be with you.
Yeah. Sue, thank you so much again. Our next webinar will be on September 18th, again from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Francois Goff from Growth Hive will be talking about aligning sales, marketing, and operations. So it's completely a different topic than what we just had here. Um, Again, I recommend Sue has her newsletter link, and I will provide that for everybody. I recommend highly that you sign up for it because there's great insights in there that come to your desk almost on a daily basis. I'm really impressed by that. There also will have those speaking up tips. We will send that out to everybody as well, according also with the video, and I will have a wrap up as well in the Crucible. So, and if you are in the Chicago area, or even Indiana, Wisconsin, that area, and you want to work with Sue and maybe have to do something at your foundry, please reach out to her. I mean, you can tell she's great at what she does. So, Sue, thank you very much again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We really do appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.